We turn now to Galatians and chapter 4 and verse 27. For it is written, Rejoice, barren woman who does not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. For more are the children of the desolate than of the one who has a husband. And you, brethren, like Isaac, are children of promise. Now, we considered last week how Galatians 4:27 is a quotation from Isaiah 54 in verse 1, which is the verse immediately following the chapter about the cross in Isaiah 53. And so it is speaking about the fruit of Christ's death and resurrection, and shows us the way by which one who is barren, incapable of producing a son by our own ability, can bear, can bring forth. Now, the point of the whole thing is that under the old covenant, people could not bring forth a righteous life by their own ability. But under the new covenant, we can. Under the old covenant, all that people could bring forth was dead works. But under the new covenant, we can bring forth righteousness from within our heart and in our life. Rejoice, barren woman who does not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. For more are the children of the desolate than of the one who has a husband. The point is this, that the one who has a husband and who glories in that and who thinks of their own ability with which they can please God is in a despised condition as far as God is concerned. Our righteousness is like filthy rags. But the barren one, the one who is poor in spirit, for that's the point of this allegory, the one who is incapable of pleasing God and who acknowledges her helplessness, can be enabled by the Spirit to do what? It says very clearly in verse 27, to have more children than the one with a husband. Now, the whole point of that is that under grace, we can produce more righteousness than the law could produce. That's the whole point of it. We can produce something far more acceptable to God through the new covenant than what the law could produce under the old covenant. Isaac is far more acceptable to God than Ishmael. That's the point of Galatians 4:27. In other words, just like Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. The righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees was the righteousness of the law. But he said the righteousness required in the kingdom of heaven exceeds that righteousness of the law. And he went on in the following chapters in Matthew 5 to explain what he meant. The old covenant requirement was, thou shalt not commit adultery. The new covenant requirement is, thou shalt not lust in thy heart. The old covenant requirement was, thou shalt not commit murder. The new covenant requirement is, thou shalt not despise thy brother, or be angry with him, or even hate him. No, we are not to lose our temper at others. That is the new covenant requirement. And that's what it says here, that the barren woman can produce more children, a greater degree of righteousness, because it produces the righteousness of the heart, which the law could not produce at all. And we, brethren, like Isaac, are the children of the promise. But, verse 29, as at that time, he who was born according to the flesh, that is Ishmael, persecuted. We read that in Genesis 21, verse 9, how Ishmael mocked Isaac. So also, who was born according to the Spirit, so it is now also. Now, one would think that those who proclaim this glorious gospel, that we can be righteous not only on the outside but also within the heart, should be received with garlands and welcomed. But alas, it is not so. The vast majority of believers do not desire to hear this gospel. They do not desire to hear a gospel which tells them that they can be completely free from sin in their heart, that they can be free from lust in their heart, can be free from hatred and anger and bitterness and any sin in their heart. And there is a persecution that comes upon the preaching of this grace, because they live under a false grace which continuously tells them we have to be defeated, we have to fall into sin, we have to keep on failing, We have to keep on falling, and therefore they live in their sins, defeated, and usually in a much worse condition than the Israelites were under the Old Covenant. And as it says in Galatians 4:29, they would persecute and hinder and obstruct and fight against and criticize and oppress those who preach the gospel of the true grace of God. But what does the scripture say? Verse 30. The scripture says, Genesis 21:10, "Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be an heir with the son of the free woman." And that's what Sarah told Abraham, and God told Abraham to listen to Sarah. And that's what's quoted here in Galatians 4:30, that the bondwoman and her son must be cast out. That is, the one who preaches that which brings you into bondage, he must be cast out. But what actually happens is that the one who preaches freedom through obedience to the commandments, the one who preaches that the grace of God can give you a pure heart, he is often the one who is cast out. And that's what Jesus also said. The religious world cannot accept you because they did not accept me. The world hates you because you do not belong to the world. If you did belong to this corrupt system that keeps people in bondage, then they would love you. But because you do not belong to this corrupt system, but I have chosen you out of this corrupt system to bring you to freedom. John 15:19, therefore the world hates you. And he said, the time will come, John 16:2, that they will cast you out from the synagogues and even kill you. Because the apostles preached freedom through the grace of God. And that's why Paul got thrown out of the synagogue. And even today one finds that those who preach the true grace of God are not welcomed by those who want to remain in bondage. But the scripture, God's opinion is, as far as he's concerned, he has no place for the bondwoman. He has no place for those preachers who proclaim bondage through the law. Brethren, Galatians 4:31, we are not children of a bondwoman, but of the free woman. And he goes on to say in Galatians 5:1, it was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore keep standing firm, and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery. To be under law is to be a slave. We've seen that consistently in this passage. To be a slave. To be a slave. We may try to please God with external acts, but we shall remain slaves of sin. Jesus told the people who tried to keep the law meticulously, he told them in John 8, verse 31 onwards, that they were slaves of sin, and that if they knew the truth would set them free. So this is one way by which we know whether we are living under a false grace or the true grace. Very clearly, Romans 6:14 is the answer. If you are under the true grace of God, sin does not have dominion over you. That's the way we can find out. If sin, any sin, can rule me and bring me into bondage, whether it's lust or the love of money or a wild temper or bitterness or an unforgiving spirit, or any sin brings me into bondage, it must be because I haven't understood the true grace of God. Because grace frees me from sin's power. It was for freedom, Paul says in Galatians 5:1, that Christ has set us free. Now don't get entangled again in a yoke of bondage. Christ has set us free through grace. Don't get back into bondage. That was Paul's burden. Don't come back under law now. Don't come back under a ritual of external observances and satisfy your heart with that. Don't come back under external acts and please your heart with that. Keep in that freedom of grace where your heart is pure. No one can be free whose heart is not pure. So seek for purity of heart, that you might be free with the freedom in which Christ has set us free.